Hello and welcome back to CBR MTG. My name is Angus Mackay and today we're doing a deck tech for Legacy this time with Lazav Stiflenaut. Yes, you heard right, Stiflenaut is back in the game and better than ever. This time with the new Lazav. The Multifarious is a 2-mana legendary creature shapeshifter, and when it enters the battlefield you may Surveil 1, the new tech from GRN, and you can pay X, and Lazav the Multifarious becomes a copy of target creature in your graveyard with converted mana cost X, except its name is Lazav the Multifarious. You can pay X, and Lazav becomes a copy of target creature in the graveyard with converted mana cost X, except its name is Lazav the Multifarious. It's legendary in addition to its other types, and it has this ability, which means, my friends, that you can copy your Phyrexian Dreadnaut in the bin once it's in the bin, and you can make your Lazav a 12/12 with Trample. The original Stiflenaut deck was basically blue-black, and it just used Phyrexian Dreadnaut and Stifle. So Phyrexian Dreadnaut is a 1-mana artifact creature, 12/12 with Trample, and it says when it enters the battlefield, sacrifice any number of creatures with total power 12 or more, or bury Phyrexian Dreadnaut. Now this is usually a downside, but because of Stifle, the instant from Conspiracy, you're able to counter a target activated or triggered ability. So for 2 mana, you can put a Phyrexian Dreadnaut onto the battlefield and counter the triggered ability, and then have it just have a 12/12 on the battlefield, which is goddamn pretty strong. However, it's become a lot stronger now that Lazav is in play, because we can use Lazav for basically 3 mana. We can turn it into a Dreadnought, and we can just go from there. This list comes from a conversation in MTG The Source, and comes from Convent Elite 30, and they're just sort of brewing it, figuring out what to do, but I saw it and I thought, man, this was a great new tech on Stifle, so I thought we might just break it down. Now this is a bug version for Lazav Stifle. You're basically playing bug tempo, where you're using Nimble Mongoose and Tarmogoyf as your other big creatures, and you're just sort of tempoing your opponent out with dazes, and you're using the stifles that are already in your deck to stifle your opponent's fetch lands, to stifle your regular opponent's activated abilities, and using Wasteland to sort of tempo them out of the game and use your small creatures such as Tarmogoyf and Nimble Mongoose and Lazav now to put cheap, efficient creatures on the battlefield and stop your opponent from having any fun. So starting with the creature base, as we mentioned before, we have Lazav and Phyrexian Dreadnaut. 4 Tarmogoyfs, 3 Nimble Mongoose, 3 Dark Confidant to get us a little bit of value. And the rest is just basically good bug control decks. So we have 2 Abrupt Decays in the main, a Liliana the Veil, Liliana the Last Hope, a bunch of Thoughtseizers, bunch of Days, bunch of Brainstorms, bunch of Fatal Pushes, and then your lands are pretty stock standard. So that's pretty simple, but looks like it can pack a punch. Going into the sideboard, we have our basic mid-range strategy, where we bring in a little bit more Fatal Pushes and Spell Pierces, Diabolic Edicts for big creatures, Surgical Extraction, Relic of Progenitus, Scavenging Ooze for graveyard decks, Collective Brutality against Burn and other sort of mid-range strategies. 2 Assassin's Trophies in the sideboard. Now, I've moved them to the sideboard. Originally, the deck called for 1 main, 1 side, but I think the Assassin's Trophy is better off in the sideboard just because we're trying to deny our opponent for mana, and I think the benefit that you're giving by ramping your opponent will sort of negate the plans that you're using of using dazes on their polluted deltas and other fetch lands and wastelands to kill non-basic lands. So keeping the Assassin's Trophy in the sideboard seems like a good idea. Golgari Charm is there as well for 1/1s and other sort of strategies like that. And basically that's about it. Now this is pretty simple on the surface, but look, we'll see how it goes. It looks like a pretty strong deck, and I'm looking forward to stifling ourselves and our opponents, so we'll see how it goes. Alright, and we are here playing some Lazav Stiflenaut. In this hand, we keep a hand that's pretty reasonable. I mean, we have the combo in hand. It's pretty lucky to have the old 1-2 punch, but this deck isn't inherently a combo deck, but I mean, it's pretty nice to be able to play the combo first. So we lead on Phyrexian Dreadnaut. Yep, the jigger's up, the jigger's up. This leaves us option for turn 2 Lazav, turn 3 Phyrexian Dreadnaut plus something else. So hopefully it'll be enough, but we'll see, we'll see. So ideally, I mean, we can play the Phyrexian Dreadnaut, and we can just play the Lazav on turn 2, and then turn 3 we can swing for 12. But you do have the option of just playing out that Phyrexian Dreadnaut turn 1 and just letting it die. And our opponent's playing big red, so that's going to be an interesting game for us. So we'll see. Opponent leads on Chalice off their Magus of the Moon and Blood Moon. Now, Chalice on 1, Chalice on 0 does prevent our Lotus Petals that we don't have, because we are the value version of this deck. But we'll see what we can get away with. Fortunately enough, we just have the combo in hand without any need to use Chalice on 1 nor Chalice on 2. So Chalice on 1, not Chalice on 0, so we should be fine. So we leave Stifle on top. Not a huge reason to leave Stifle on top, considering it's going to get countered, but I think it's pretty much wrapped up from here. Luckily, we had the fast start. Our opponent had the fast start as well, but I think ours is sort of better. So we'll see. Usually, when you're playing against Big Red, they usually just have one threat at the very start of the game on turn 1, and then after that, it's kind of okay. So we just go ahead, we play out that, we use the ability of Lazav, and this is what we're meant to be doing. So we'll get him for 12. Good old Phyrexian Dreadnaut. Getting him for 12 with tramples, so hopefully this is enough. We'll see what our opponent gets up to. We'll pass back to our opponent now, and we'll see what their draw is. They have to draw something good, and they decide not to, so they scoop it up. Alright, going into sideboard for this game, we take out 3 Fatal Pushes, 1 Stifle, bring in 1 Golgari Charm, 1 Duress, and 2 Assassin's Trophies. Hopefully that'll be enough to stop what our opponent's doing, but it will be very, very hard to be on the play, especially with such little counter magic. Notably, no Force of Wills coming from our side, so we'll see if it's enough. Our opponent leads on Ancient Tomb and Chromox. Okay. And then, yep, goes straight for the Blood Moon. Well, that's fair enough, and that might actually lock us out of the game, because we do have 2 Polluted Deltas. We do have the answer in hand, but not in the colors that we were hoping for, because we don't have any basic forests. Even if we did, it would be very hard to find them. So basically, we're almost at the scoop point at this very point in time, even now, because we might get lucky. We'll play out this Phyrexian Dreadnaut, hopefully rip our 1 of Island and our 1 of Swamp, and then draw a Lazav. So, stranger things have happened. So we'll pass the turn. See what our opponent's follow-up is. They do have 3 mana, so they will be able to cast something. Yeah, and our opponent plays the Hazoret, and we just scoop it up. There's no point. Game 2, we bring in 2 Abrupt Decay and 2 Spell Pierce. Now that we're on the play, we should be able to hopefully take down something important on the first go. So we do have our Spell Pierce, which will be good. So the decision here is to wait and see if our opponent plays something that we can Spell Pierce immediately, or we lead on the Thoughtseize. At this point, we decide to pass, just because our opponent's deck is full of redundancy, and just being able to take one of their threats will possibly leave another threat in hand, and then if we get Blood Mooned while we take another Blood Moon, we won't be very happy about it, so we'll see. Our opponent leads on Chromox, pitching Chandra and Magus of the Moon. If I'm not mistaken, if I remember correctly. But pitching a Legion Warboss, in fact. So yeah, here comes the Chalice on 1. So we'll just Spell Pierce that immediately. Stop our opponent hopefully from playing anything else. But we'll see. If our opponent has two good cards in hand, we might be in trouble. But we'll lead on Thoughtseize, and we'll see. We do have the Lazav in hand as well, so it could be okay. We'll lead on the Brainstorm, hopefully fetching getting a land off the top, which we did. So we'll just go straight for the Thoughtseize. Yeah, and this is the power and downfall of the deck, is being able to they have Magus of the Moon, which would have been game over for us. However, we managed to snag it in time, so we'll see. Hopefully this next Thoughtseize just closes out the game as well, because our opponent does have the Simian Spirit Guide, enough to play something, but we'll play out this Phyrexian Dreadnaut, put it in the bin, and then hopefully follow up with the Thoughtseize, just to hopefully take whatever threat they have, and then we should be good. This is essentially a combo deck. You just have to stop the first couple of plays, and then you can kind of do whatever you need to on your leisure. So we do use the Thoughtseize. Luckily, we take a Chandra, Torch of Defiance, and pass the turn. Able to fetch out all of our colors now. And with the Daze backup, we're probably going to be okay. Yeah, look, our opponent's going to go for it. So they did find something lucky, but unfortunately it's just not enough because we have this daze. So we'll thankfully daze it, play out our Lazav, surveil a polluted delta, replay our underground sea, and pass the turn. Like this might be enough, but we do have the Phyrexian Dreadnaut and bin, so we do have the combo assembled. So we'll see. Our opponent drew a mountain for the turn, so it's probably just about game over for our opponent, unfortunately. That top deck land is not what you want to see. Yeah, so we will copy the Phyrexian Dreadnaut, and then we're kind of okay. Like, even if our opponent plays Chandra, or if they play Blood Moon, we should be okay. So we'll just get him for 12, and this is a 2-turn clock, so if our opponent can't rip something off the top soon, then they're probably going to have to just scoop it up. We follow it up with a Nimble Mongoose. We may as well, just in case. And then we'll see what our opponent goes for the draw. And unfortunately, it's not enough. So they'll just scoop it up. So that was pretty good. I mean, that was the nuts. We we had the thing both times. All right. Going into the next game with Lazav Stiflenaut. We keep a pretty okay hand. I mean, we could get blown out, but we have the Fatal Push and hopefully something else. But looks like our opponent's got the early start with Ancient Tomb, Lotus Petals, so definitely show and tell. Thinking we're in big trouble now, but hopefully this Dark Confidant will draw us enough cards. Thankfully, they put in a Sneak Attack and pass the turn, which is really good for us. So we rip a Abrupt Decay off the top, which is not particularly relevant, but hopefully we rip something more relevant. Thoughtseize is perfect here, so we will... yeah, so we'll be able to get in with our Dark Confidant because it did come into play last turn, but basically we're just going to try and stop our opponent from casting spells for the rest of the game. So our opponent has Ponder and Show and Tell. We end up taking the Ponder just because if they rip the blue land off top, they can do whatever they want with it. But like if we stop our opponent from finding red mana, then we could be okay. Our opponent has Show and Tell in hand and basically nothing else, so... We'll see. They do play out that City of Traders, so we're just going to go straight for this. I guess we play out the Tarmogoyf first, but we give them one turn to find what they need. But at this point, just taking the Ancient Tomb offline means that next land that they have to play will have to sack their City of Traders, so it ends up being a really bad situation for them. Now, we play out the Lazav, probably a bad idea just because we want to conceal as much information as possible going into the next game because we pretty much have this one locked up, but we'll play the Lazav anyway just in case. Could get lucky. But yeah, we waste the Ancient Tomb and this could be game over for our opponent. I mean, if the next draw, they have 3 cards in hand, 4 cards now, but yeah, they scoop it up. Going into sideboard now, we take out the 4 Fatal Pushes, 2 Abrupt Decays, 3 Nimble Mongoose. And then we bring in our anti-combo package of 2 Spell Pierce, 1 Fluster, 1 Duress, 2 Edicts, 1 Surgical, 1 Golgari Charm. Surgical for the Intuition. So if they play Intuition, they usually just put 3 cards in their bin, and then we Surgical the one that they choose. So we lead on the Thoughtseize. Our opponent brainstorms in response to hide their good cards. And now we're in a situation, we just decide to take their Pyroblast, but they have a lot of good cards in hand, especially that Rebel Master, which could be pretty bad for us considering it took out all of our removal. But it's not uncommon to see your opponent bring in some sort of fast creature. Like usually it's Arcane Artisan straight from Battle Bond, but it looks like our opponent's using the Rebel Master plan. But fortunately, once again, we do have the combo, so... we'll be able to swing in with this Lazav with our Phyrexian Dreadnaut. So we just, in this instance, we just play the Dreadnought, let it die, instead of stifling it, and then we do the thing. So our opponents let up Spell Pierce mana, but then we decided to go to combat because we can activate that at instant speed. So our opponent Shame scoops it up. All right. Going into match 3 with Lazav Stiflenaut. And, I mean, we keep this hand, it's, like, pretty fine. We have one of the pieces of our combo, but we actually have both of them with the Stifle, so if we get lucky, we can stop our opponent from doing the thing. But considering our opponent led on Island and Floodstrand, it kind of seems like they're on Miracles, so we try and keep them off lands as much as possible by playing that Stifle, but then we're met with a Daze, which is very unfortunate for us. So because they have enough mana to pay for days, because they tapped their mana correctly, they're able to stop that from happening. They lead up on a young pyromancer and then force the days that we push through. So unfortunately, this young pyromancer is going to become a problem for us. It ends up being a very fast clock if we can't get rid of it. Fortunately, we drew the fatal push, so I mean we play it straight away. We're still open to days, but we're not open to spell pierce by doing it on our first main phase. So we'll see what happens. Opponent follows up with a preordain, setting up their hand. We find some more land, thankfully. So we have to, unfortunately, because we fetched us, because we got a swamp, we have to play the land first before we brainstorm, which cuts off our combo of fetching after you get a brainstorm, but this is fine. We decide to play out our Dreadnought once again, so we do have the same amount of stifles as we do Lazavs, so it could be a reason to keep it in hand just in case we draw the second Stiflenaut, in case we draw the second Stifle, but we'll see. This True Name Nemesis is going to prove to be a very big problem for us, so we have to do something pretty relevant soon. We fetch away our bad stuff, get a green land, and then we just play out our Nimble Mongoose. This at least is a 3/3, so we can hope to race our opponent, but we'll see. Our opponent decides not to attack on their first turn, so a little bit scared, so hopefully keeping the True Name Nemesis at bay, but eventually we're just going to start trading blows, and it'll be the person who gets the most amount of value eventually will be the one who gets there. Our opponent wastelands us off blue, but fortunately we drew enough for this Liliana of the Veil, which is absolute game over for our opponent, but they did have the days, which is not anything that we can do. Unfortunately, we only do have one Liliana of the Veil, so that was kind of our only main deck win con against True Name Nemesis, so now we're just going to keep trading blows until one of us comes out on top. So trading blows back and forth, the True Name Nemesis being very hard to deal with for us, but they managed to speed up the clock with a lightning bolt, which actually takes a whole turn off. I mean, we were okay for a little bit. We just needed to find one more threat so that we could close the gap on our opponent, but we'll see. We go to wasteland their volcanic island, because if they had red mana at all, they can just lightning bolt us, but unfortunately they have the lightning bolt in hand, and that just means game over for us, unfortunately. So yeah, we will not be able to beat this True Name Nemesis pre-board. It makes it very, very hard. Yeah, opponent plays lightning bolt and we scoop it up. So going into sideboard now, we take out the 3 Dreadnoughts and we bring in 2 Edicts and 1 Golgari Charm. I mean, we still have 1 Dreadnought, but we're trying to basically outvalue our opponent, and playing that combo and having it get fatal pushed or edict or bolted in response can be really difficult for us. So we'll see how we go. Our opponent leads on a Thoughtseize. Unfortunately, we did have to mull to 5, so it makes it very, very difficult for us in this game, where it's essentially going to be who can value out the other opponent harder with, you know, it's essentially this Delver deck is, you know, it's a tempo deck, so we can try and tempo them out, but not in a mull to 5, and now we're in this really bad situation where we have an Edict and 1 land in hand. Our opponent still has pretty much a full grip of 5 cards. So, I mean, we'll see. We play out the island, and our opponent ponders, but we decide. we almost decide to scoop it up, but I think we'll keep it going just for a little bit longer and see if we can come back from this. Fortunately, we did draw the Mongoose, so that will be able to speed up the clock once we get to threshold. Only 4 cards in our graveyard at the moment, but you know, could be more, could be more. We'll see. With the fetch land, we essentially have 5 cards in our graveyard, but we definitely need to keep the board clear as much as we can, because our opponent can just block, so we edict away the first opportunity that we can, taking out that Delver. And go for the Thoughtseize, and opponent cracks in response, possibly just concealing their hand from us, but makes it really difficult for us to come back from this, for sure. We're on an uphill battle, but fortunately after this Thoughtseize resolves, we will have a 3/3 Nimble Mongoose. Hopefully it'll be enough, but we're really holding on to hope. And yeah, so we take the Force of Will, which I think was actually incorrect at that point, because our opponent didn't have any more blue cards. but taking the Lightning Bolt actually helps us with our clock, and taking the Fatal Push prevents them from killing our Lazav if we end up drawing it. So we'll see. But we end up swinging with the Mongoose. Now this is this is an interesting line because we do have to stifle them if they try and play anything, because they can just play a blocker. So we go straight for the first stifle we can. Again, not 100% sure if this is the correct time to stifle, because stifle's a very hard card, and we'll see if we get punished for it. But yeah, our opponent has the Edict anyway, which wouldn't have done too much for us. But at this point, our opponent just like outvalued us, and they can start just getting in, and it makes it very, very hard for us to come back at all. Our opponent has a lot of answers in hand, so it's going to be an uphill battle from here. Thankfully, Brainstorm is a redraw, so we will get to put back 2 bad cards. We leave the Dark Confidant, and this is a reason to possibly take the Fatal Push before, because although our opponent does have the Lightning Bolt still in hand, if we take one of the things, then we can hopefully get a redraw with this Dark Confidant. But yeah, our opponent just Fatal Pushes and then goes in for the kill. We're on 11 now, but it's pretty much over. I mean, this game is going to be very hard to come back from. Unfortunately, our opponent just tempoing us out of this game. We go to 8, and yeah, our opponent swings for 5, and then we go to 3, so we pretty much just scoop it up from here. There's no point continuing. Alright. Match 4 with Lazav Stiflenaut, testing out the new Lazav card from GRN. Our opponent plays the Green Sun Zenith classic turn 1 play of land into Green Sun Zenith to ramp themselves out. Unfortunately, our opponent is going to be able to once again just outvalue us, and we only have 1 land in hand at the moment, but our opponent's just going to wasteland us off 1 land, and then for the rest of the game we're going to be playing catch up because our opponent essentially has 2 mana with the Dryad Arbor turn 1 play. I mean, it does open them up to turn 1 removal, but we didn't have it at the time, so there's not a whole lot that we can do. So our opponent wastelands us and then plays the Thalia. Now, it's kind of fine. Our opponent can play the Thalia, but we have turn 1 kill Dreadnought, turn 2 play Lazav, so it's kind of okay. But besides that, we don't really have any other plays because, I mean, we have to fetch our basics from here, which is mostly fine, but our Thoughtseizes is going to cost 2, our Brainstorms are going to cost 2, like, Thalia's huge game against us, and something that our opponent can do, like, this is just huge value plays at the moment. Being able to play this Renegade Rallier from Ether Revolt, getting back the Wasteland means probably big problems for us, so we'll keep them off being able to Wasteland us, and then we'll just play this Lazav. I mean, we have 12 power of Trample on board. I mean, we've stopped our opponent from killing us with Thalia value, and yeah, we'll just see if it's enough. But our opponent killed their Dryad Arbor and got Crop Rotation and got Caracas, so something that we probably need to consider going into sideboards is that our opponent can get Caracas pretty easily with Crop Rotations and Knight of the Reliquary. This is going to be really hard to come back from because Lazav, as I check here, still retains its legendary status, so our opponent gets in. We decide whether or not we're going to trade, but I think we have to force our opponent to play out their Caracas and then sort of go from there. But opponent Stoneforge Mystic fetching out a Sword of Fire and Ice, which is pretty bad for us as well because that means that they can just play it as opposed to hopefully killing them and leaving the Battle Skull stranded in hand. But we go for the attacks. Our opponent makes the first move, which is actually really good because if we activated Lazav in response, if we activated our Lazav first, then we're actually wasting mana and we wouldn't have been able to play this Dark Confidant. So, I mean, our opponent had to do it. They weren't going to let us get in any value, so they end up just Caracasing it straight away. Unfortunately, with this Sword of Fire and Ice attached to the Thalia, it means that we actually have to chump block here, so we won't get any value of our Dark Confidant. But my reasoning is, if they get in any combat damage, they can just send 2 damage to Dark Confidant anyway, so we may as well chump, prevent them from drawing the card, and then just take our beats. I mean, but this is pretty bad. I mean, we can Fatal Push the Thalia, but Our opponent has Caracas open forever. Like, they're just going to leave Caracas open for the rest of the game. We still have Lazav in hand. Not that it would mean anything, but yeah, we go to push the Thalia, but yeah, it's gonna be pretty hard. I mean, we stop our opponent from getting the trigger from sort of Fire and Ice, but it's just not going to be enough. Our opponent can replay the Thalia and re-equip before we get another turn, and we would really like to top deck a land for this Thalia Last Hope, but our opponent's just not going to let us get that value. They're just going to play the Thalia out as soon as we can. And pretty bad beats, that's for sure. But yeah, we fatal push the Thalia. They replay the Thalia. We think about whether or not we're going to pay for this 2-mana Brainstorm, but our opponent has us dead, so we just get scoop it up. Going into sideboard, we take out the 4 Dazes, and then we bring in 2 Assassin's Trophies, 1 Fatal Push, and 1 Collective Brutality. So this taking out the Dazes is like a weird line. I'm not sure 100% sure if I like it, but I think just like bringing in more removal, taking out the Dazes, which will become pretty irrelevant for most of the game. Just those early game plays is where it's good, but our opponent's going to be attacking us in ways that Daze won't really help too much. So, I mean, we keep a good hand. This is, once again, has the Lazav and the Phyrexian Dreadnaut in hand, so we pray and we pray that our opponent doesn't play any wastelands, but could be game over. Our opponent leads again on the Dryad Arbor, Green Sunsan's Dryad Arbor line, which is a great one, but we will bolt the bird this time because it is something that we have to do. Unfortunately, we've left ourselves open to Wasteland again. I mean, we always left ourselves open to Wasteland, but now we're in a situation where we've missed our land drop, so our opponent knows that we're top decking lands at this point, so pretty risky keep, but the upside was so high, you know, you just got to sort of go for it. We'll see, but our opponent has the turn 2 Thalia, which is definitely fine. We can play around that. Again, we have the all creature hand except for the Thalia. We play out our second Nimble Mongoose. Still missing a land drop is bad beats. We actually decide to go for the Phyrexian Dreadnaut instead, hopefully putting it in the bin, you know, trying to get a little bit more value out of that. But once we've missed our second land drop and we can't attack, and we don't have basically anything in our graveyard, our opponent's pretty free to wasteland us, so we have to just cross our fingers and, yep, never mind. And I bet you can assume what happens here, but we speed up the video a little bit so you can see, yep, we play nothing. And we scoop it up. Alright. This is match 5, the last match for this Lazav Stiflenaut, and we're 2-2, so it's okay. I mean, we're gunning for that 3-2 victory, but it looks like we're up against lands. So hopefully the the hand that we kept that was multiple wastelands, Brainstorm and Thoughtseize will be enough. But we'll see. The unfortunate thing is that we have to be very, very particular about how we wasteland here. But playing this Brainstorm out, we decide to actually put away the Abrupt Decay because it only kind of hits Explore, and although Explore is actually a huge game for our opponent, I think it's more important that we put on some early pressure and hope to go from there. So we go for the Misty. Try and get, unfortunately we cannot get a swamp for this one, but I think it's okay. We get the green land as well, so we can play our Tarmogoyf next turn and go for the Thoughtseize, hopefully getting something relevant. Now, I'm not 100% sure if this is the correct line, but I did take the Molten Vortex over the Gamble. Seeing those cards in hand, Gamble is actually pretty huge for our opponent anyway, but playing the Vortex just stops all of our cards from dying, so we decide to leave up Stifle pretty much for the rest of the game because eventually we can, you know, Wasteland, and then Stifle the Thespian stage, copying the Dark Depths. It's really awkward. You have to be very, very particular with what you stifle because you can't stifle the Dark Depths. I have 0 counters, so I'm going to transform. So you actually have to stifle the tap ability and hope that that's enough. Unfortunately, it doesn't really do too much, but hopefully the combo of Stifle and Wasteland will get us there. Unfortunately, our opponent had the Punishing Fire line anyway, so maybe taking Vortex was, you know, we'll see. But Tarmogoyf's a 5/6 at the moment, so hopefully it's enough. We play out the extra Wasteland, and then, I mean, Tarmogoyf is a 4-turn clock, so our opponent really has to do something. This is funny. I talked to my opponent during this, and they Punishing Fire our Tarmogoyf, and we think for a moment. We go, okay, that's fine. You can Punishing Fire our Tarmogoyf. And then they're Punishing Fire our Tarmogoyf and then play the Bazooka Bog, because if our Tarmogoyf goes to a 0-1, then it's kind of bad beats for us, but our Tarmogoyf actually isn't Delirium, it's just all Graveyard, so fortunately our Tarmogoyf stays alive. Our opponent, hopefully not a fatal misplay for them, but very, very unfortunate that they made that line. Now, we have this Thoughtseize in our hand, and like, we could play it out. I really want to play this Lily, because the way that I feel like the way that we win this game is continually stopping our opponent from getting too much value off their Life from the Loam, just by making them discard cards. So, I mean, we still hold up these double Wasteland and Daze, because the double Wasteland and the Stifle, because playing Stifle is good, correct, but having the double Wasteland is really what we need. So we'll leave it up. It's actually probably a good idea to Wasteland our opponent and then hope that they make the Marit Lodge in their main phase, and then we can just untap and play Liliana. But we'll have to see. It's gonna be a very awkward line. Our opponent gets back Glacial Chasm and a couple of other lands, so we'll see. I mean, our opponent has the thing, but now that they're tapped out, so I mean, they can activate Thespian Stage now because it's two and tap, but if they play anything, we're just going to Wasteland straight away so we can get rid of this Dark Depths and just keep the pressure up. Unfortunately, so our opponent plays this gamble, which is very funny because we will sacrifice, kill our opponent's Dark Depths, and maybe I'm missing something, maybe you have to let me know in the comments below, but I think it's just the power of MTGO, but for whatever reason, our opponent can tap the Dark Depths to make a... Oh, they have Riftstone Port in the bin. That's what happened. I was looking over this footage and going, how is this working? But it works enough. So we go for the Stifle this time because we still have the ability to keep our Wasteland up for next time. So there's no point double Wastelanding. We just stifle the... we stifle the activation and then let our Wasteland resolve, which is hopefully going to slow them down for a little bit, but we do need to keep that pressure up as high as we can so that, because our opponent can reassemble Dark Depths combo multiple times in a game, but it's just up to us to try and stop that from happening. So we draw a Phyrexian Dreadnaut, of course. It is an artifact for Tarmogoyf, so at this point we think about whether or not we're going to play it, but thankfully we did end up taking our opponent's Exploration, which is a huge game for us. But yeah, we the Exploration is how our opponent wins, because like if they go Wasteland and Dark Depths, then we're like, okay, well now we're down and we have to Wasteland and go on from there, but that's how they accumulate so much value. So taking that Explore actually helps us up our Tarmogoyf, and also sort of prevents the clock from getting any faster. Our opponent goes for the Life from the Loam, completely reasonable. We decide to keep up Pain for days, which is probably misplay anyway, but we would love to play this Liliana on time. Now our opponent has the opportunity to make Dark Depths, but we're keeping it at bay with this untapped Wasteland, so we'll see what happens. We do have this Polluted Delta in hand. Now, again, a definite dubious line, but I hold on to the Polluted Delta just so our opponent doesn't think that we have enough mana for Liliana. Like, if they're playing around Liliana, then we put them in a position where they have to make Marit Lage main phase, which is super good for us. So they go to Wasteland our Wasteland, we Wasteland the Thespian Stage. Now they're in a position where they have to make Dark Depths in their main phase, and we get to untap and play Liliana. So hopefully that was the correct line, but look, we'll see. We definitely keep them at bay, at least for one turn. This is good because it it actually strips them of 2 lands to play this Maritlage, so we will get a lot of value out of untapping with this Liliana on the battlefield. And then after that, we're just going to have to keep ticking up, like, have to tick up, tick up, tick up. Our opponent has 5 cards in hand, but we'll see if it's enough. So our opponent has Maritlage, and they end up Life from the Loaming again, of course. But yeah, this deck is very, very hard to deal with. Pretty much, definitely one of the best decks in the format, because just being able, like, if you counter their Life from the Loam, it's fine. They dredge it back and they go again. Like, you think the graveyard is super important, so you bring in Graveyard Hate and they play around it. Like, with the introduction of Scattered Groves, which is not Scattered Groves, the Sheltered Thicket, which is the red-green cycling land, they actually have the benefit of being able to get stuff at instant, like do their dredge step at instant speed, so they can dredge back Life from the Loam pretty easily. So fortunately, we do get the Liliana line. We get to keep the pressure on, and our opponents have 4 life, so they're going to have to do something pretty major to stop us from killing them. And I mean, Glacial Chasm does it. It does it for now, but they don't have the luxury of paying the cumulative upkeep cost too many times. For anyone who doesn't know, Glacial Chasm prevents you from attacking, but it also prevents any damage that's dealt to you. So Tarmogoyf is not going to be able to attack while that Glacial Chasm is on the battlefield. So we'll have to see what we can do, but we do end up playing that Nimble Mongoose, keeping an eye on that Glacial Chasm, reading it very carefully, ticking up. We're going to get rid of this Phyrexian Dreadnaut. It's just, I guess, yeah, never mind. We'll get rid of the days. Keeping the Phyrexian Dreadnaut Stifle combo in hand, just in case. You never know, you never know. But not very relevant at this point, because we pretty much have the win. We just have to wait and see what our opponent does. So we send a message with the Tarmogoyf, of course. You can't not attack when your opponent has Glacial Chasm on the battlefield. What are you, crazy? But yeah, so our opponent does have the benefit of keeping Glacial Chasm on the battlefield, but they don't have an Explore, so they can't. Usually the line with the Glacial Chasm is that you sacrifice it, you Life from the Loam, get it back, play it again, and then that's how you sort of soft lock your opponent out of the game. We do go for this Stifle on the Sheltered Thicket just to stop them from getting an extra dredge step, hopefully preventing them from, that's just a tempo play, really, just trying to stop them from getting anything. So our opponent does choose to pay the cumulative upkeep to begin with, but that's the last time that they'll be able to pay, because our opponent's on 2 life. Oh, never mind. They decide to put it in the bin, go for the Life from the Loam, get it back. But yeah, our opponent's dead at 2 as they are at 4, because we don't have any red in our deck, so we can't burn them out. And not that it matters anyway, but look, yeah, our opponent's just going to play out this Life from the Loam, get Glacial Chasm back, and then just do that forever. But Glacial Chasm does have this huge cost that our opponent does have to pay, which is sacrificing a land each turn. So by doing this, they actually go down 2 lands each time, because their land drop is Glacial Chasm, and that costs them a land. Plus, they have to sacrifice it at the beginning of their upkeep to not pay the cumulative upkeep. So it's going to be pretty hard from our opponent from here. But at this point, I see the days in hand. I see that our opponent doesn't have very many lands left, and I think it's time to try and go for that days, just for the last. If our opponent doesn't play around it, then we can maybe snag a Life from the Loam, and then that's basically game over. If our opponent can't Life from the Loam back their Glacial Chasm, then it's basically just game over. So we'll see. We'll see. It ends up being very, very grindy from here, because our opponents, they pay the upkeep this time because they don't want to sack. But yeah, they do realize that they're at 2 life, and it's pretty bad for them. But being able to play this Thespian stage means that they're able to copy the Glacial Chasm next turn, so that's kind of a way to get rid of it. But it will cost them a lot of resources to do so. Our opponent's at 6 cards. We're at 2, a virtual 1 after we use this Liliana, but that's not really our main problem at the moment. Our main problem is just making sure that our opponent cannot play optimally, and eventually we will be able to tick this Liliana up to a point where we can choose Glacial Chasm in one pile and all their other permanents in the other, and then they have to choose Glacial Chasm, otherwise they die. but then they're at a situation where they have to sacrifice it anyway, and we can try and go for that elusive, flawless victory, which isn't very common in Legacy, but it is, you know, it's possible. It's possible. So our opponent goes to copy the Glacial Chasm, which is totally fine. Gives them one extra turn to sort of find the pieces that they need, but they'll need to play a land drop, so hopefully we get them, but they need to play a land drop and then play Life from the Loam at some point, but I think they're okay. It looks like they're just going to be okay with just playing nothing and passing the turn, which is going to be okay for us, but we're slowly whittling our opponent down. Tarmogoyf being very, very big at this point, representing a whole bunch of damage. A little bit less with this Bazooka Bog, but fortunately we don't play any Snapcaster Mages. I think, and we'll talk about it in the wrap-up, but I think playing green is possibly just not worth it. I mean, looking at this battlefield, you wouldn't say the same thing, but having Snapcaster Mages would actually be a pretty huge game here. Or even mission briefing, like that double blue isn't that much of a downside, but being able to surveil to fill your graveyard for the Phyrexian Dreadnaut is pretty interesting. So it'd be interesting to see what comes out of it. But yeah, we continue to tick up Liliana, hoping for that ultimate to save us a couple of little minutes. But we'll see. Our opponent opts not to kill themselves with the cumulative upkeep, and lets the Thespian stage die. But yeah, I mean, they're just going to keep doing this until we find something to do. But we're feeling pretty okay. I mean, Liliana's going to ultimate eventually, hopefully in the next 2 turns. But I mean, I feel like we have the inevitability, but we'll see. We'll see what our opponent can pull out. Unfortunately, they do have to dredge Life from the Loam each time, so they lock themselves out of the opportunity to play anything but lands for the rest of the game. And it's not impossible, but it is what it is. We do think about this really carefully about whether or not we're going to daze here, because our opponent will have to pay 1, but I think in the end we decide that they're going to get the Glacial Chasm anyway, and that's probably the only plan that they're going for, so we hold on to the daze. Being able to pay with the Mox Diamond, not really ideal, obviously, but at the very least we're stopping our opponent from advancing their board state, which is actually a huge game against lands, because when you're playing multiple lands a turn, you know, you want them to not be able to do as well as they possibly can, so we'll see. But yeah, Brainstorm is actually really nice here because it gives us a redraw, hopefully finding something of relevance. I mean, we have the Lazav, very tempting, but I think this Wasteland's just going to do the job. Wasteland being really, really crucial for our deck as well, so very thankful that we're able to kill this Glacial Chasm finally, and then go in for the kill with our Tarmogoyf and Nimble Mongoose. So pretty much game over for our opponent, but very grindy. I cut a lot out of the previous games, but I didn't cut this one out because I had a lot to say about it and I felt pretty good about it. Going into sideboards now for lands, we take out our Liliana of the Last Hope, our Fatal Pushes, and our Abrupt Decays. Bring in 2 Assassin's Trophies, 1 Surgical, 1 Relic, 1 Nihil Spellbomb, 2 Diabolic Edicts. Now, taking out the Fatal Push is like pretty risky because we know our opponent's playing Tireless Trackers, and sneak peek, our opponent plays a Tireless Tracker, but Diabolic Edict just being so much better than Fatal Push, except in that exact instance, and obviously Liliana not really doing very much, but it will be good to see if we can use this Assassin's Trophy over the Abrupt Decay to kind of use it as an extra wasteland to kill our opponent's relevant lands. But our opponent had the perfect start, so they're in a situation now where we have Stifle. We can stifle this wasteland, but we have to play a Brainstorm, you know? We're in this really awkward situation where our opponent has this wasteland as well, so we can't even untap. We can't even tap out to play this Brainstorm to look for more lands because we have to hold up Stifle. And our opponent knows that. Our opponent's been playing very well. Like, they have the wasteland, they have the Tireless Tracker on turn 2, which is pretty clutch. I mean, we have to play this Brainstorm, which means that our opponent can just snap off that wasteland as fast as they possibly can, which is pretty reasonable, but there's not much that we can do about that. I think possibly taking out Dazes as well would have been better for this game, but we'll see if it punishes us. The Daze felt pretty good at that point, but it could just be the wrong decision. We do decide to get rid of it, put it back on top of our library, but it might just not be enough. I mean, we have to play the swamp so our opponent doesn't wasteland us. Because of this Richard port, our opponent can just tap down our swamp every turn, and then we're gonna get tempoed ourselves. But this is exactly where Lance wants to be right now. They had the quick tireless tracker. They're just gonna keep swinging in and getting clues, and being able to instant speed dredge with the clue tokens is just pretty huge game. But the tireless tracker is putting down quite the clock. And our opponent tapping down our lands with Richard Port is going to make things really difficult as well. We are back in the situation where we have Stifle again, so we'll keep it up as long as we possibly can, but eventually we'll have to play something. Like, we don't have the green mana at the moment to play any kind of blockers, and even then, Tarmogoyf is not a good blocker for this tireless tracker, so it's going to be a pretty hard slog from here. But our opponent was on the play. They had the turn 1 exploration wasteland. Like, this is basically exactly where they need to be. But yeah, our opponent's just going to Richard import us out of the game, especially off blue. So we don't have a brainstorm. We can stifle the trigger if we wanted to, but it makes it very, very hard for us. Yeah, our opponent just snaps off that wasteland as well. So yeah, our opponent's definitely stopping us from playing Magic this game, which is totally reasonable. We end up playing the Wasteland, but like, it might just be too little too late. I mean, we can kill the Richard Import and stop them from tapping down a land, but being down a land is almost as bad as having them tap down a land every turn. So at least they're using mana to tap down our land. But if we Wasteland, like, we just have one less land. We're going to have to top deck a blue source so we can brainstorm and try and find more lands. This is pretty bad news for us. Oh dear, yep. Our opponent has multiple clues, multiple opportunities to kill us, but yeah, this is a much faster clock and much harder to deal with than the Maritlage, because at least with Maritlage we have a plan, but yeah, we scoop it up. Now, going back to the sideboards, we do end up taking out some of the Dazes, definitely considering the line that I was talking before about how just Daze is just not good enough in the late game, so we end up taking it out. We're going to try and go for the long slog, so we take out 2 Dazes and bring in 2 Fatal Pushes, and yeah, run it like that, see how we go. And I do keep this hand. I mean, it has most of the pieces. We do have to get pretty lucky dodging our opponent's Wastelands for the most part, but Assassin's Trophy might be able to clean up any explorations or anything bad that our opponent plays. Assassin's Trophy being a very, very versatile card for this game. In the original list, we did have one in the main and one in the side, but the tempo disadvantage that you give yourself by giving your opponent an untapped land is possibly just not worth it. We do end up Thoughtseizing away our opponent's first exploration, but apparently it's just not good enough because our opponent is able to play their second exploration. But one exploration is bad, 2 explorations is pretty much game over, so I have to be very, very careful here. And our opponent goes for the wasteland, the exploration as intended, and yeah, plays out the Mox Diamond that they found off the top, which is pretty good game for there. We'll see what they discard. Discarding a Mazavith, so we'll see. I mean, again, we're in a pretty bad position, but it's not just game over. We could be okay. This Dark Depths is fine. I mean, we can take care of it for the most part, but we do have to act quickly, essentially. So we opt not to fetch to keep ourselves protected from Richard and Port, but yeah, we'll see. We'll see. Our opponent decides to tap down our swamp, possibly a good time to just snap off that Assassin's Trophy, but we play it a little bit easier here. We're going to kill their exploration before they have a chance to untap with it, because untapping with exploration, as I said before, pretty bad. And never mind. Instead, we let our opponent untap with it, which is fine. We're going to try and go for the Dark Depths. Use it as a wasteland to try and stop our opponent from Thespian staging. So our opponent has the gamble. They don't have the card in hand, but I can only assume that they're going to gamble either for Life from the Loam or for the Thespian stage itself. So, but they did put a Life from the Loam in the graveyard, so Yeah, very 1 mana red Entomb is pretty good when you have nearly no cards in hand. So we'll see. But unfortunately, friends and family, I made a very, very crucial mistake here and misclicked. Saddest story ever told. I was thinking about what I was going to do, misclicked my thought process and got another Bayou, but unfortunately, we have a lot of blue cards in hand. It would have been very, very nice to have that extra blue mana, but we decided against it because obviously we're very smart and Magic is very hard, but yeah, we unfortunately, I mean, we were 1-1 and the matches were 2-2, so like we had the chance to get the glorious 3-2, but you know, misclicking can only help us so much, and yeah, it could just be game over from here, unfortunately. But yeah, we draw another blue card. Our opponent plays the piece that they need, and yeah, that's it. We scoop it up. So that was all we had with Lazav Stiflenaut. And I mean, the deck was really good. I really enjoyed it, but I think there's a couple of different directions that you could take with it. I really liked the green splash, but or the green as a total, but I think that we could possibly just drop the green, just go straight blue-black, maybe bring in some Delvers or even Death Shadows if you wanted to go down that direction, because obviously Death Shadow works pretty well with Lazav, but there's also the capability to bring in Varloz the Scar Striped, which is a 3 mana, 1 green, black for a Troll Warrior, and it gives all your creatures in your graveyard scavenge, and so we can scavenge away the Phyrexian Dreadnaut, make it bigger, make anything on our battlefield bigger, and then we can kind of go down that road if we decided to. I do like being able to answer everything with Abrupt Decays, Golgari Charms, and Assassin's Trophies, but I think possibly it just needed just a little bit more oomph, and being able to play Force of Will is probably where we want to be as well. So I'd probably play Force of Will and maybe cut down some of the Nimble Mongooses in exchange for Varloz. But otherwise, it was pretty fun, and I think it actually has a capability to be very strong, because although we didn't get too much stifle action happening, the stifles were never bad. Like being able to stifle our opponent's fetch lands, being able to stifle our opponent's Thespian stage to stop them from comboing off, felt like really good tempo plays, and I'd be more than happy to play this deck again. Thank you again for joining us for CBR MTG's Legacy gameplay videos, and hopefully we'll see more of this in the near future, but keep looking on because we'll be putting out more videos constantly, different deck techs, and the format shifted. It seems to be going pretty well, so stay tuned for more Legacy content, and feel free to like and subscribe, and, you know, just share with your friends if you need to, but yeah, have a wonderful day, and we'll see you next time.